It took exactly 17 minutes to read my father's will. I know because I watched the grandfather clock in the corner of his desk and counted every second while my brothers split an empire that is worth $18 million. The name on my birth certificate is Preston Thorne. The part about Thorns has always had an asterisk. I am 28 years old, and I have. Every year, I was reminded that I shouldn't be the son my father, Victor Thorne, made. He built his real estate empire from the ground up. That's what the Forbes article said. He passed away. 5 days ago, he was at his desk, signing contracts with a pen in his hand till his heart stopped. The man worked himself to death, and for some reason that seemed right. He had always lived in transaction mode, where everything was judged in profit and loss, including his kids, especially myself. Attorney Raymond Finch sat across from us at the mahogany table, his aged hands skillfully sorting papers. My oldest brother, Garrett, 35, sat on my left. He was already wearing our father's Rolex, which he had taken from the body. Holden, 32, messaging his wife about which home they should buy to my right. First, move into. And then there was me, the illegitimate son, the one who reminded our father's 1 week moment with his secretary 29 years ago. The assets in Manhattan include 3 penthouses on Fifth Avenue and 2 business buildings in Tribeca. I leave my son Garrett $8 million, Finch read in a flat voice. In the wood-paneled parlor, Garrett laughed and poured himself another drink of his father's 100-year-old scotch. The old man finally figured out who was really in charge of the New York office. The Hampton home, the whole yacht collection, including the Celestial Dream, and all the cars in the long. I leave my son Holden the $7 million storage facility on Long Island. I really laughed out loud. The automobiles. Miranda is going to go crazy. That collection has a 1967 Ferrari worth $2 million by itself. Kept breaking up the empire like kids picking through their Halloween goodies, investment portfolios, Swiss accounts, and art collections, even the company jet. Every few minutes, one of them would look at me with barely hidden. I was amused as I waited for my name to be called. We all knew it was coming. The question was, how small would it be? Finch eventually said, Treston, and both. My brothers rushed forward like vultures, realizing that Finch was carrying something. He dug inside his briefcase and pulled out a single brown envelope, old and with slightly bowed corners. My name. It had wobbly writing on it that looked like it was my father's near the end. I leave this. An envelope that he can open in privacy that has everything he needs to know. There was silence for about 3 seconds until Garrett burst out laughing so hard that he spilled his scotch. Envelope? 2 years of trying to play, he said, and he was choking on his own laughter. Did your family and dad leave you a letter? Holden seemed calmer, but his eyes. Maybe it's a thank you card, she said with wicked satisfaction. Thanks for figuring out where you fit in, youngster. Here's a hallmark moment to make you feel better. Or directions to the closest job center, Garrett said, as he took out his phone to text someone the funny news. Oh my God, wait till the board learns about this. We received paper, but the bastard didn't. The kingdom. Bench gave me the envelope with something that may have been pity in it. In his eyes. It didn't weigh anything. 28 years of attempting to earn my place in this family, and it all came down to something that was less than a credit card payment. Finch, gentlemen. Your father kept telling me to read this last statement, even though I was laughing. He changed the way his glasses fit and blood may define birthright, but character decides merit. I trust you will all get what you deserve. My brothers were too drunk on winning to notice the unusual phrase. They were already fighting over who would receive Dad's office at the business headquarters. I slipped the envelope. I put it in my jacket pocket, rose up without saying anything, and proceeded to the door. Hey, Preston, Garrett called out. If you require work, I could have an opportunity in building maintenance. You'd have to start at the bottom and work your way up. Hey, you know you're underneath us, right? I kept going. They're laughing. Followed me into the marble lobby, past the portraits of Thorn men who had never talked to me, and out into the... On an October afternoon, my 10-year-old Honda sat between two Maseratis like a punchline to a joke that no one wanted to hear. Inside that package was a bank account number and 11 words that would show 25 years of lies. But I didn't know that yet. I only knew that I was done begging for scraps from their table. I sat in my car with the motor off. I stared at the envelope with my name on it in dying hands and thought about what last insult my father had saved for me. For last. I never fit in with the Thorn family, and everyone made sure I knew it. From the time I could grasp. I knew I was different, less than, and tolerated but never fully accepted. My first memory is of Garrett, who was 10 at the time, explaining to his pals at private school about why I stayed in their house. "That's Preston," he replied, pointing at me playing by myself in the corner. "Dad's mistake from his. We keep him around because Dad feels bad. My mother, Diane Russo, died. They told me it was a vehicle accident on the Long Island Expressway when I was 3. One car, brake failure. Sad but simple. She had been Victor's secretary for 5 years, and their affair had led to me, which was proof of my father's only bad decision. Victor's wife died of cancer 2 years before I was born. So when Victor's wife died, he took me in, but not because he loved me. I found out later that it was because he had to. The Thorn Mansion in Westchester had 32 rooms of frigid marble and requirements that were hard to meet. Garrett, Holden and I had our names carved into the doors of our bedrooms, but mine only said, "Guest Room 3. At family gatherings, I sat. Victor would ask his sons to sit at the far end of the table, close enough to be there but far enough away to be forgotten. About their time at Princeton, their internships with the company, and what they felt about market trends. To me, he would sometimes nod and ask if I needed anything for school. "No, sir," was always. Holden was more subtle in his malice than Garrett, but my answer was still yes. More effective. Garrett utilized brute power, whereas Holden used surgical accuracy. He would ask me to hang out with him and his pals, but then he would spend the whole time telling me why I couldn't. "Preston can't come to the country club, guys. They have things to do. Real qualifications for members." Or my personal favorite, "Preston knows why he can't be in the family pictures. It would confuse the investors." To stay alive, I had to be useful. I wrote Garrett's college essays when he needed someone to do it. When Victor needed someone to work 18-hour days, I did it. When he needed someone to take the blame for crashing the Mercedes, I did it. I stayed there for days at the workplace without saying anything or getting any credit. I became conversant in the language of servitude, assuming that if I only worked hard enough. I thought that if I gave up enough, Victor would look at me the same way he looked at others. But he never did. At Thorn. At board meetings for industries, I was introduced as his ward or special project. At charity galas, I was the young man Victor mentors. Never son, never family. I observed him pose for. I took shots of Garrett and Holden at work functions while I held their coats off camera. I heard him tell business partners about his 2 youngsters while I stood 3 feet away and couldn't be seen. What was odd was that I beat both of them in every aspect that could be measured. While Garrett and Holden were partying, I got into MIT on merit scholarships, not legacy admissions or gentlemen's C's as Ivy League schools do. They came to board meetings drunk and unprepared, but I started my own consulting firm from scratch and I had 6-figure contracts by the time I was 25. My clients were Fortune 500 firms. That would make Garrett giggle, but none of it mattered. You can't make yourself legitimate through. Victor once told me, achievement, which was the closest he ever came to admitting what was going on with me. Preston, you are who you are. Come to terms with it. So, I gave it a shot. I went out with I dated a woman named Rebecca for 2 years but never introduced her to my family because, how can you say that you're both a thorn and not a thorn? I hired a little. They rented an apartment in Brooklyn even though they could have used other family houses. I made a life next to. Yet not part of the thorn empire, like a satellite that goes about but never settles. Then Victor got sick. Last year, the heart troubles started, and, even with the greatest doctors money could buy, we all realized time was running out. Garrett and Holden circled like sharks, now visiting more often, curious about their father's stories and advice. They talked about their plans for their inheritance in front of me, arguing about which properties to keep and which to sell. What do you think Preston will get? Holden's wife Miranda asks at a family supper. Holden said, whatever it is, not bothering to speak softer. It will be more than he deserves. The call about. While I was going over contracts for a customer, Victor died. He had a heart attack at work. The secretary said. He had been found sprawled over acquisition papers with a pen still in hand. That tidbit made me sadder than the death itself in some way. The man was dead. Exactly as he had lived, alone with his work, evaluating worth in square feet and profit margins. Standing in that. 5 days later, while watching my brothers enjoy their good fortune, I realized I had. I spent my whole life trying to get affection from a man who didn't have any to give. Not to them, not to me, and not even to himself. They had planned to read the will at exactly 2 o'clock on Friday afternoon. I got to the estate 15 minutes early, putting my Honda behind a catering truck that was bringing in champagne. Holden and Garrett had already begun. They were so sure of their fortune that they hired party planners before the will was even written. I saw them in the study with their spouses sipping Victor's prized Scotch collection and splitting up their things. Like kids trading baseball cards on cocktail napkins. Simone, Garrett's wife, was on FaceTime with a real estate agent, looking at a penthouse in Milan. Miranda, Holden's wife, had spread yacht. She put catalogs on Victor's desk and circled enhancements for the boats she hadn't even received yet. Look who decided to come. Up, Garrett said when I stepped in, raising his glass in a fake salute. Come. To see how the genuine heirs get their money. I stated I was just here to read. Sitting in the corner, the same chair I always sat in during family meetings. It's smart to set realistic goals. Holden said this without glancing up from his phone, where he was evidently already listing one of the properties he anticipated to get. I'm interested what Dad thought of for you though. I bet on that broken. He never fixed the Rolex. Giving the broken son the broken watch is poetic. Attorney Raymond Finch walked in at 2 o'clock on the dot, and right away the mood in the room changed from casual to serious. Cruelty to the formal process. He had been Victor's lawyer for 30 years. Had put together the whole legal framework for Thorn Industries. Finch was the only one who knew Victor's secrets. He nodded to the spouses and said, "Gentlemen, ladies, shall we begin?" He opened his, taking out a big folder with Victor's seal from a leather briefcase with practice deficiencies. The will was remarkably short for such a big estate, but Victor had always been good at saving words. The Victor Edmund Thorne's last will and testament, which he signed 3 months before he died, takes the place of all previous wills. Finch began with the paperwork, his voice heavy with the weight of the law. Everyone thought the first 10 minutes would go exactly as they did. Garrett got the real estate portfolio in Manhattan. $8 million of prime properties, such as the skyscrapers that brought in about $1 million in rent every month. He genuinely cheered when Finch read the addresses, already thinking about how to grow. Holden got the Hampton mansion, where we'd spent summers, as well as the full yacht collection, which included 3 yachts. Boats valued more than $1 million each, plus all of Victor's cars. featuring old autos that should have been in museums. $7 million in toys for a guy who has never done an honest day's labor. They divided up the cash and other valuables, the stock portfolios and the offshore accounts that Victor assumed no one knew about. Every brother walked away with millions more in cash and investments. Simone was already texting her buddies to make plans. A party at the Met to celebrate. Miranda had opened the yacht club's website, signing up for slip places in Monaco. Finch finally read Depperton, and the room was quiet with excitement. He grabbed into his briefcase again. This time, he took out a single brown package that looked old and had bent corners, as if it had been handled a lot. It had Victor's name scrawled on it, but it was wobbly, as if he had written it when his hands were already shaking. Not doing well. I leave this packet for him to open in secret. It has what he needs to learn. The laughter came right away and was loud. Garrett really did fall back in his chair, pouring scotch all over Victor's Persian rug. Holden was more in control, but the smirk said it all. An envelope? Garrett wheezed as he laughed. 2 years, Simone said, of kissing ass for a piece of paper. Maybe it's a coupon. Catching the humor. 10% off your next therapy session if you have daddy issues. Or instructions to the nearest homeless shelter, Miranda said, as he won't. Not living in the guest house anymore. Finch gave me the envelope without looking me in the eye. It felt like it couldn't be done. It felt like holding breath. 28 years in our household, and my whole. The inheritance was lighter than a birthday card. Men, there's one more thing. Finch's voice cut through their laughing as he continued. Matter. Your dad made me read this statement. He put on his spectacles and read from a different piece of paper. Blood may decide who is born into a family, but character decides. Value. I believe that each of you will get what you deserve. Garrett grumbled. Sanctimonious to the end, as he poured another glass. We deserve at least millions, but Preston only deserves stationery. They were too happy about winning to notice how Finch looked when he read those words. The way his eyes stayed on them. As if they knew something we didn't. They were too busy making plans for their new lives to think about why Victor had pushed them to do something. A certain phrase should be read aloud. I stood up to leave, the envelope burning in my pocket. Holden yelled at me as I got to the door. Hey Preston, when you open. That being said, please tell us whether it's at least a good paper. You may frame it and hang it in whichever studio apartment you end up in. Their laughter followed me out of the house and past the people who were catering, setting up for their party, past the pictures of prickly patriarchs who would never claim me, out into the October afternoon, when my Honda was the only thing in my life that was honest. I sat in my car for an hour with the engine off, staring at the package like it was about to blow up. I wanted to rip it up without opening it. Keep what little dignity I had left by not taking part in. The last time Victor was humiliated. But being curious is stronger than being proud. Especially if you've been looking for answers your whole life. The parking lot was empty except for the catering trucks. I could see the celebration starting through the windows of the estate. The shadows of my brothers and their companions. Toasting to their luck. I felt the envelope in my palms as I turned it over. The paper's quality. It was old, maybe perhaps decades old, and it was the kind of hefty stock that no one used anymore. I finally opened it. There was one piece of paper that has been folded once. Victor wrote the letter by hand in his precise script, although it was steadier than the writing on the envelope that looked like it was done years ago, when his hands were still strong. This is for Preston, the kid who was never meant to be. Account number, 444782911163. Liberty Bank in Zurich. Your mom knew why. That was all. No reason, no apology, just fatherly advice. It was just a Swiss bank account number and a note about my dead mother. I read it 5 times, attempting to figure out what those few words meant. The kid who was never meant to be. Victor couldn't help but tell me that I was a mistake, even in his last message to me. I drove home to my apartment in Brooklyn, my head buzzing with ideas. It could have been a little trust fund, just enough to show that he thought about me, but not enough to matter. Maybe that was a sign, $100 to match the 100 times he had said no to me. It could have been nothing. An account that is closed. One last. A joke from the hereafter. That morning, I left my laptop open on the kitchen table, working on a presentation for a customer that I would never finish. I went to the website for Zurich Liberty Bank. Their separate logo promises the Swiss banking secrecy that had kept wealth secret for hundreds of years. It was easier to log in than expected. The account number, my social security number, and a security question. My mother's maiden name. Russo. Diane Russo was the secretary who made the mistake of falling in love with her boss. Before I could see the balance, I paused because I could find out what Victor's last insult would be. There was more to his message than that. You will know why your mother died. For 25 years, the truth has been waiting. I told them to tell me now, but the connection was already dead. I sat in my chair and looked at the computer screen. There was still an open tab for the accident report and another for the bank website. My mother had been killed. Victor was aware of it. There was also a Swiss bank account that would explain everything. My heart was racing so fast that I could feel it in my throat as I clicked back to the banking site. The dashboard for the account took a long time to load, and every second felt like an hour. When the balance finally came. When they came up, I had to blink a few times to make sure I was seeing the numbers right. This couldn't be done. There has to be a mistake. I reloaded the website once, twice, 3 times, yet the number stayed the same. The phone rang and broke my shock. Not known. Number for other countries. Mr. Preston. The voice was old and had a German accent. Formal. Hi, I'm Heinrich Ducker. I've been waiting for you to get to this for 25 years. This account. I think it's time you found out the truth about your mother, father, and the $18 million your brothers recently got their hands on. I looked at the screen again and saw the inconceivable number looking back at me. I realized that the falsehood that had formed the basis of my whole life was going to come to light. I said, I'm listening. The number on my laptop screen didn't make any sense. I refreshed the website 3 times, sure that there was a mistake or something that had been moved. Decimal point that would bring this back to reality, but the balance stayed the same. $127 million. Mr. Preston, are you still there? Heinrich Ducker's voice brought me back to reality. I said, this can't be real, while holding the phone tightly as if it could evaporate. There has been a mistake. Ducker said, there is no mistake, and his German accent made each word sound cautious. Wait. For 29 years, this account has been waiting for this moment to happen. Mr. Preston, the money is only the first thing you need to know. I clicked on the history of the account, going through decades of deposits. They began in 1996, which was 3 years before I did. Came into being. Recurring payments from something named Project Prometheus. Federal routing codes and government serial numbers. The last deposit was made on October 15, 1999, the day my mother died. Ducker went on to say that your mother, Mr. Preston, was not who you thought she was. Diane Russo was not just a secretary. She was Diane Russo, a senior special agent in the FBI's Financial Crimes Division. Division of Crimes. She was working for Thorn Industries as part of a 3-year probe into your father's money laundering business. The room began to swirl. To keep from passing out, I had to lay my head between my legs. Going out. That's not possible. She was only his secretary. They were having an affair. Ducker said softly that the affair was real. That was the issue. Agent Russo fell in love with the person she was after. You were never meant to be. She tried to get away when she found out she was pregnant. From the surgery. She wanted to tell Victor the truth so that they could both be safe. But Victor, I said, found out first, and the pieces started to fit together in my head. Yes, he found out who she really was when you were 2. But by that time, something had happened that was not foreseen. Victor had also fallen in love with her. And no matter what, he adored you. The boy who was never meant to be born had become the only real thing in his world of planned deals. I thought about all those years of being cold. The distance, the refusal to call me son, and the continual reminders that I didn't belong. If he loved me, he had a humorous manner of displaying it. He kept you away from him to keep you safe. Mr. Preston, your brothers Garrett and Holden were already being trained to run the illicit business. They were 10 and 13 years old when your mom died. They are old enough to be harmful if they understood the truth. If they found out that you were the son of an FBI agent and that your life was a threat to everything they stood to inherit. What do you think would have happened? It all made sense now that my mother was dead. They killed her. Whispered. Yes, but not personally. Garrett told Holden when he found out who your mother really was. He told Holden who he was. They all worked together to pay someone to cut her brake lines. They were kids, but they were Thorn children who had been taught to see threats and get rid of them. Victor found out what? They had already done it by the time it was too late. And he hid it, I continued, my rage increasing in my throat. He chose. Give up his boys for murder, or safeguard the only one. The only person in the whole thing who is innocent. You. He negotiated a deal with the FBI, then. Before she died, your mother had gathered proof for 3 years. Everything you need to take down the Thorn Empire. Victor would still be in charge of the operation, giving the Bureau information to help them catch bigger fish. They would let the Empire stay in place until he died, which would keep you safe, if not loved, as you grew up. Cash. Your mom was already turning evidence into assets to get ready to run with you. She sold information to anybody who wanted it. Competition shifted money through channels that would take decades to trace. It was her insurance policy. When Victor kept working on it after she died, adding to it every year. Every crime your brothers did, every dollar. They took money from your account, and he put it back in. The blood money they are getting today is built on the same. The base of your wealth. The difference is that yours is clean. I stood up and walked around my modest flat, trying to make sense of 28 years of deceit. Coming apart in minutes. Ducker said there was more. Look at your safe messages. In the account. I clicked on the tab for messages. There were hundreds of files. Proof of every crime, including bank documents, photos, and taped chats. Done by Thorn Industries over the course of 30 years. But the most recent files were not the same. They were from the last 5 years, all about Garrett and Holden. Your brothers weren't just Mr. Preston, inheriting wealth today. They were taking over the criminal enterprise. They've been happily growing it by adding murder, extortion, and people trafficking to the family business. Your father wrote down everything. He wanted you to have the choice he never gave himself. You can leave with your. You can either get rich or do the right thing. All of the evidence is there and may be used. Without a doubt. I gazed at the files and finally understood what Victor's last remarks meant. Character is what makes a person valuable. He wasn't making fun of me. He had been judging all of us. I sat with that power for 3 days. $127 million and enough proof to ruin everything the brothers had just celebrated getting their inheritance. The logical half of me told me to take the Take the money and go away. Start over far away from the thorny legacy of blood and deceit. But I couldn't stop thinking about my mother died alone on the highway, and the 13-year-old kid who ordered her killing is currently drinking champagne in a penthouse in Manhattan. I made my choice on the fourth day. I sent $10 to a different account. Enough to make the life I wanted, but not enough to immerse myself in money I didn't earn. The remainder would stay where it was, developing, waiting, a tribute to my mother's sacrifice that I didn't need to claim. After that, I made 2 bundles. The first one went to the FBI and had all the files in it. From the account, every paper my dad had collected, and every crime my brothers had done in there, wanting to make the empire bigger. The second item went to Raymond Finch with clear instructions. Bring it to my brothers at 2 p.m. sharp on Tuesday, the same day they made fun of my envelope. I made a reservation for a flight to Zurich for one-way on Monday night. The arrests took place on Tuesday afternoon. I saw CNN broke the scoop while I was in my hotel room in Switzerland. A lot of federal agents are around. The main office of Thorn Industries. Garrett was let out in handcuffs, and his face was a mask of anger and uncertainty. Holden was trying to run away when he was tackled in the parking lot. The garage he just got from his parents. The news said it was the biggest bust of a financial crime in New York history. 30 years of money laundering, murder, and extortion all coming to light in one afternoon. The only thing I sent them was a piece of paper, the same kind of old paper that Victor used for my envelope. The message was short. Character is what makes you valuable. Enjoy what you deserve. The kid who was never meant to be there. All of the assets were frozen within hours. The federal government took all of the houses, boats, and cars. Simone was captured trying to run away to Milan with bags full of jewels. Miranda was caught at the yacht club while she was still trying to register boats that she didn't own anymore. The empire constructed on blood money fell apart completely, bringing with it everyone who touched it down, but one individual did not. Me. After that, I changed my name. Became someone new in a country that knew how to change things. The 10 million I had was more than enough to make something genuine. I founded a charity for kids who lost their parents to violence. Kids who were aware what it was like to be collateral damage in someone else's fight. So far, we've helped 300 families by giving them what I never had. Someone who saw their anguish and cared about it. Heinrich Ducker is still in charge of the main account. It has now expanded to more than 200 million. Through putting money into things. A lot of money that doubles every 10 years. He calls once a. Every year on the anniversary of my mother's death, I get the same question. Mr. Preston, will you claim it this year? And I always say the same thing. The child who was never supposed to. To exist is doing great without it, because that's what I ultimately got. Sitting in that Swiss hotel. Witnessing my brother's life fall apart on international TV from my room. Victor had given them exactly what? The Thorn Empire was what they had always wanted. Every dollar of it was poisoned. And he would escape from it all, which I never knew I needed. My mom passed away, trying to keep me from living that life. Victor kept me at arm's length to protect me from it. Every time I got the cold shoulder, every time someone told me I didn't belong, every time someone denied it, it wasn't turned down, was keeping it safe. He made me strong enough to live without his affection, since he knew that one day I'd have to live without his help. The money, the proof, or even the true inheritance were not the real things. The truth. It was the chance to pick who I wanted to be when everything I thought to find me was taken away. Garrett and Holden never got the chance. They were born into the empire, taught how to govern it, and then killed by it. But I was the child who was never intended to be born, so I could be anyone I wanted to be. When I go by banks in Zurich, I sometimes worry of the millions of dollars sitting there and growing like a golden tumor. I sometimes think about what my life would be like if I took everything. Then I remember how my mother died to keep me away from that money and how Victor lived in frigid distance to keep me from its degradation. And I keep going because some things you get from your family are too hefty to handle. Some fortunes aren't worth what they cost. And occasionally the best thing about being rich is realizing that you already have enough. That's the reality of being the kid who wasn't not meant to be. Once you accept it, you may live your life any way you want, on your own terms. If this story struck a chord with you, please take a moment to like it video and send it to someone who needs to hear that their worth isn't based on how others see them. Let us know what you think about Preston's pick in the comments below. Would you have grabbed all the money or left like he did? Also, don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more compelling stories about family, truth, and the choices we make that make us who we are. Thank you for watching. Don't forget that your real inheritance is the ability to select who you want to be.